وكلمته كانت واضحة مثل ما أنا دعمت فايدة بدي أدعم إيران.
فتحنا أبواب اللهيب، أبواب جهنم على البلد.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. The Higher Defense Council convenes at Baghdad Palace to improve security measures in the country. The Syrian regime is accusing rebels of shooting at UN experts as they are inspecting a site in eastern Ghouta, Damascus. And senior military officers from Western and Muslim countries will gather in Jordan to discuss the regional impact of the Syrian conflict. The Higher Defense Council is lauding the patriotic spirit of the Lebanese that stirred Lebanon away from strife after the latest bombings that rocked the country. Following a meeting chaired by President Michel Sleiman at Baghdad Palace, a statement released by the council says it had discussed the movement of the explosive situation from one area to the other in an attempt to create instability and insecurity. The conferees discussed the measures taken by security forces to improve their mobilization. The council also discussed the latest Israeli aggression on Lebanon and ways to preserve the country's sovereignty. The meeting was attended by Premier Najib Mikati and ministers including Adnan Mansour, Fayez Ghosn, Marwan Sharbel and Wael Abu Faoud. Army Chief General Jean Ahwaji was also among the military and security officials who attended the meeting. Beirut MPs have held an extraordinary meeting at the House of Parliament to study the issue pertaining to preventive security measures for Beirut. They've also discussed a political decision related to placing cameras across different streets and in gathering places to detect any sabotage move. The attendees also stressed the necessity for boosting the performance of municipal guards. Grand Mufti Sheikh Mohammed Rashid Kabbani is holding officials from the rival March 8 and 14 camps responsible for the recent developments in Lebanon. During a visit to Tripoli, Kabbani has accused bickering politicians of using the rhetoric of vengeance, adding the victims are paying the price for the sectarian strife in Lebanon. Kabbani is further accusing world powers of dragging the country into the regional conflict. He says Israel knows it won't have stability unless it divides Arabs and their countries, and expresses fear the situation is going to worsen. The Mufti believes those who planted the explosives in Dahieh are also responsible for the Tripoli bombings because he says there is a clear plan to create a clash among Islamic regions. He is urging all parties to resort to cooperation and understanding. UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Derek Plummy, is calling on the Lebanese to unite, exercise self-restraint, and cooperate with security forces. After talks with Prime Minister Najib Mikati at the Grand Serai, Plummy says he is confident Lebanon can confront challenges. The UN official offered his condolences over the last week's twin bombing attacks in Tripoli, calling for the arrest of those who are responsible for them. Plummy also said that despite the turmoil in the region, Lebanese people should make an effort to prevent the negative impact of the Syrian conflict on Lebanon. A metal bottle mistaken for a bomb has been found overnight outside the local NBN television station. A security source says a bottle filled with soil and thinner solvent with wires attached to it was found hidden in a flower pot outside the station's headquarters in the southern Beirut neighborhood of Jnah. The report comes after the TV network announced earlier this morning that security forces had defused a bomb placed out front. An NBN security guard is being interrogated as part of an investigation carried out by Lebanese security forces. This incident takes place after car bombs both in the capital and the north area have brought about heightened security measures in the country. At least 4 Hezbollah fighters are receiving treatment at a Beirut hospital after coming into contact with chemical agents in Syria. This is according to a security source who says between 4 and 5 members came into contact with chemical agents while searching a group of rebel tunnels in the Damascus suburb of Jubair over the weekend. On Saturday, Syrian state television said Syrian soldiers found chemical agents in Jubair and that some had suffocated while entering the tunnels. The source says the Hezbollah fighters are currently in stable condition, but did not say what chemical agent the fighters encountered was, except that it was dispersed in the form of gas. Mortar shells hit the center of Damascus, wounding 3 people. This is according to the Syrian news agency Sana, who says a shell fired by rebels hit the Al-Hassan Mosque in the Abu Ramani neighborhood. 1 person was wounded and the mosque's minaret was destroyed. 2 other people, a woman and her child, were wounded by mortar fire near Umayyad Square in the center of the capital. On another note, Syrian rebels cut the army's only supply route to the northern province of Aleppo. Rebels had in recent days captured several villages in Aleppo province before reaching Khan Nasser, situated on the highway to Hama in central Syria. The route was the only avenue of transport between the 2 regions since Aleppo International Airport was closed in January because of the intense fighting in the town. Senior military officers from Western and Muslim countries will gather in Jordan today to discuss the regional impact of the war in Syria. Among the attendees are Jordan's Chief of Staff, Mishal Mohammed al-Zaban, and General Lloyd Austin, the U.S. command responsible for 20 countries in the Middle East and Central Asia. U.S. Army Chief General Martin Dempsey is also attending, as are Chiefs of Staff from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Canada. The meeting will discuss the situation and scenarios on the ground, especially after the recent dangerous developments. It comes as the United States and its Western allies are blaming President Bashar al-Assad's regime for a suspected chemical weapons attack near Damascus last week. A second meeting session will also take place tomorrow. The Syrian regime is accusing rebels of shooting at UN experts. A UN spokesman says the first vehicle of the chemical weapons investigation team was deliberately shot at multiple times by unidentified snipers. No injuries were reported. The attack occurred as the team was inspecting a site in eastern Ghouta, Damascus, where several hundreds of people were killed in a poison gas attack last Wednesday. Despite the event, UN inspectors have managed to enter the southwestern Damascus suburb of Mu'addamiyya and met with victims of a suspected poison gas attack last week. A convoy of chemical weapons investigators entered through a roadblock manned by Syrian Air Force intelligence at the entrance of a suburb besieged by forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius says there will be a proportionate response to the alleged chemical weapons attack in a Damascus suburb, which he blamed on Syria's government. Fabius says no decision has been yet made on whether to take military action against Syria, but doing so outside the auspices of the UN Security Council will be problematic. In an interview published by Russian newspaper, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has dismissed claims his forces used chemical weapons and warned Washington that any U.S. military intervention will fail. For his part, British Foreign Secretary William Hague says all information points to the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government, and evidence could have been already destroyed ahead of UN inspectors visiting the site.
We're clear in the British government that it was the Assad regime that carried out this chemical attack, large-scale chemical attack last Wednesday that has led to the deaths, the agonizing deaths of so many hundreds of people, including tragically so many children. All of the evidence points in that direction, in that one direction. The eyewitness accounts, the fact this area was under bombardment by the regime forces at the time that the chemical attack took place, it all points in that direction to the responsibility of the regime. And of course this is a regime that possesses chemical weapons stockpiles and has used chemical weapons in the past, including on a smaller scale over the last year. If the regime believed somebody else had carried out this attack, then they would have given access to the UN inspectors. Several days ago, it was last Wednesday night, that we and other countries called for that at the United Nations Security Council. They've refused that up till now. They have continued to bombard with artillery the areas concerned east of Damascus, which of course may have destroyed some of the evidence. So we have to be realistic now about what the UN team can achieve. They will no doubt work hard at it, but the fact is that much of the evidence could have been destroyed by that artillery bombardment. Other evidence could have become degraded over the last few days, and other evidence could have been tampered with. So we have to recognize that it is evidence, some of which could by now have become compromised. We cannot, in the 21st century, allow the idea that chemical weapons can be used with impunity, that people can be killed in this way and that there are no consequences for it. And so we believe it's very important that there is a strong response, and that dictators, whether they are Assad or other people who might slaughter their own people or attack the people of any other country, know that the use of chemical weapons is to cross a line, and that the world will respond when that line is crossed.
U.S. Senator John McCain says Washington should take serious action against Syria, referring to the attack in Damascus which claimed the lives of 1,300 people last week. McCain says he is totally convinced President Bashar al-Assad's regime is behind the atrocity and is urging President Barack Obama to respond swiftly and effectively. Coming up next, Lebanese oud player Marcel Khalife has attracted hundreds of fans to the Baalbek International Festival. That and more after the break. Welcome back. At least 47 people have been killed following a series of car bombs, roadside bombs, and shootings in Iraq in the past 24 hours. As tensions intensify between Sunni and Shiite Muslims across the Middle East, the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Islamic State of Iraq has significantly increased its attacks this year. More than 1,000 Iraqis were killed in July, the highest monthly death toll since 2008, according to the United Nations. Iraqis have suffered extreme violence for years, but since the start of 2013, the intensity of attacks on civilians has dramatically increased. And now for news around the world in brief. Italy's Supreme Court is deliberating on whether to back a prosecutor's ruling that orders former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi's Fininvest company to pay more than 500 million euros in damages over the acquisition of a publisher 20 years ago. The beleaguered center-right leader recently said the government must go on, indicating he will continue to support the fragile coalition after his conviction for tax fraud in July rocked its stability. Afghani President Hamid Karzai is urging Pakistan to help his country defeat fighters who he says are bent on destabilizing both countries. Karzai made the appeal during a meeting with Nawaz Sharif, the Pakistan Prime Minister, during his one-day visit to Islamabad. Karzai says the two countries should launch a joint campaign against the menace of terrorism afflicting both nations. For his part, Sharif says constructive dialogue is essential for improving ties between the neighbors. The trial of senior Chinese politician Bo Xilai wraps up with many allegations. The politician has been accused of accepting more than $3.5 million in bribes, embezzlement of public funds, corruption, and abuse of power. Bo has refuted all charges. His once thriving political career was brought to a halt last year by a scandal involving his wife poisoning Neil Haywood, a British businessman and friend at the time. A date for the final verdict has not been set yet. Lebanese oud player Marcel Khalife has attracted hundreds of fans to the Baalbek International Festival over the weekend. Lebanon's oud master entertained a packed audience in the Silk Laboratory Theatre La Magnanerie in Beirut. The festival was supposed to have been held in Baalbek as part of the Baalbek International Festival, but it was moved to the capital due to security tensions in the country. Speaking ahead of the concert, Khalife highlighted the significance of culture in Lebanon and how it is shaped by wars and conflict, and says cultural vision should be strengthened. Khalife performed on stage for more than an hour and a half, along with his nephew Sari Khalife, who joined the show with his cello, entertaining the audience with a bouquet of old songs written by the late Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. This marks the end of our bulletin for today, and now let me remind you of our headlines. The Higher Defense Council convenes at Baghdad Palace to improve security measures in the country. The Syrian regime is accusing rebels of shooting at UN experts as they're inspecting a site in eastern Ghouta, Damascus. And finally, senior military officers from Western and Muslim countries will gather in Jordan to discuss the regional impact of the Syrian conflict. Those were today's headlines from Future Television, live from Beirut. Catch Yumna Naufal again tomorrow for more updates, and have a great evening.
كلمته كانت واضحة، مثل ما أنا دعمت فايدة بدي أدعم إسرائيل.
فتحنا ابواب اللهيب، ابواب جهنم على البلد.